The little girl's scream tore through the tiny bedroom as the man pressed his weight down on her again, stealing the safety she should have had as a child, and sexually assaulted her. She was only 7. He had done this so many times over the years that the girls had lost count, each night breaking them a little more while he walked around the house like a normal dad. Her small body shook with terror, but just beyond the half-open door her 15-year-old brother stood frozen in the shadowed hallway, fists clenched, teeth grinding, drowning in rage and guilt for every time he hadn't been able to stop it. What the man didn't see, as he ruined another child's life, was the boy's eyes hardening, and that this time, something was about to happen that he would never see coming. But to understand how a family reached this moment, we have to go back to the beginning, back to the day his stepfather first walked through that front door, back to when this house still felt like hope. Before we go there, if you like deep, emotional true crime stories told in simple language, remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss the next chapters of this case. Now let's step back in time. Years before the stepfather came into their lives, this was just a small rental house on a quiet street in a tired town. A town where factory whistles used to blow in the morning, but now half the factories are closed. A town where kids ride old bikes in crack parking lots, and everyone knows who lives in which house. Ethan grew up here with his mother and his 3 little sisters. His mom worked long shifts at a grocery store. She had tired eyes but a soft voice. She always seemed to be rushing somewhere. To the bus, to the store, to pick up the kids, to heat up dinner. Money was tight. The fridge was never really full, but she tried. She always tried. Ethan, the oldest, felt like he had to be the man of the house from a very young age. He took out the trash, walked his sisters to school, helped with homework when he could. He was not perfect. He sometimes snapped, sometimes wanted to be anywhere but home. But deep down, he loved those little girls more than anything. They followed him everywhere. They copied his words. They laughed at his dumb jokes. He felt annoyed sometimes, but also proud. Then one year, his mother met someone, a man from her job, a man with an easy smile, strong hands, and a quick laugh. He came into the store often. He bought his lunch there. He told Ethan's mom that she worked too hard. He told her she deserved better. At first, she blushed when she talked about him. She started coming home with a little extra excitement in her step. She wore lipstick again. She hummed while she cooked. For a tired single mother, this new attention felt like sunlight. After a few months, the man came over for dinner. He brought the girls small gifts. Cheap, shiny bracelets. A stuffed bear. Candy they were usually not allowed to eat before dinner. He joked with Ethan about school and sports and growing up. He made everyone feel seen. At least, that is how it looked. The town whispered that she was lucky, that it was good to have a man around to help with the kids and keep things in line. Bills got paid more easily. There was sometimes pizza on Fridays. The girls started calling him by a soft nickname, then Dad. He moved in, his boots by the door, his coat on the hook, his voice in every room. From the outside, it looked like a broken family finally getting fixed. From the inside, small things began to feel off. Ethan could not name it yet. Not then. It was just the way his stepfather's eyes sometimes lingered a little too long on the girls when they played. The way he sometimes shut doors that used to stay open. The way the youngest sister stopped wanting to sit on his lap, but could not explain why. These were tiny cracks in the picture. Tiny cracks that most people would ignore. Tiny cracks that, if someone had really looked, might have shown the storm that was coming. Something dark was moving into that small house, slow and quiet, and one day, it would push a 15-year-old boy to pick up a gun in the living room. But for now, in this early time, the danger is just a shadow in the corner. The family is still smiling in photos. The neighbors still wave. The town still thinks this is a normal, blended family trying its best. No one knows yet what is really happening behind those thin walls. And no one knows how high the cost will be when the truth finally explodes, right before the first obvious signs of horror begin to show. How do years of secret abuse slowly eat away at a family? while the world outside sees nothing at all. The house did not turn into a horror movie all at once. It changed slowly, almost too slowly to notice. At first, after the stepfather moved in, life seemed easier. There was more food on the table. The girls had new shoes for school. The gas bill was actually paid on time. Ethan's mother looked less tired. She laughed more, even if the laugh was sometimes too loud and a little nervous. The stepfather liked to show himself as the hero of this little house. He fixed broken chairs. He replaced a light bulb and acted like he had saved the family from darkness. He took the girls for ice cream. He joked with the neighbors. He told people he was trying to give these kids a better life. On the outside, everything looked like progress. Inside, rules changed. Slowly, almost like a test, the stepfather took control of every part of their world. He decided what shows were allowed on TV. He decided when the girls could go to a friend's house. He decided when Ethan could use the phone or the old game console. He even decided when the lights had to be turned off. At first, Ethan thought this was just what dads did. He had never really had one before. Maybe this strict, heavy feeling in the air was normal. Maybe kids were supposed to feel this scared of making a grown man angry. Over time, the stepfather's voice filled every room. He commented on everything, on the way Ethan walked, on how he talked, on how the girls laughed too loud, on how his wife dressed, on how much salt she used in the food. Any small thing could become a problem. There were good days, when he seemed kind, generous, playful. And then there were bad days. On bad days, his eyes turned cold and his jaw locked. He came home smelling like beer. He moved through the house like a storm, knocking into chairs, slamming doors, criticizing everyone. The little sisters learned to read the sound of his boots on the floorboards. Ethan learned to take his sisters to their room and close the door before things got too loud. But the worst part of the story was not in the shouting. It was in the quiet. It started with small, strange things. The stepfather began to help the little girls with their baths, even though they were old enough to do it themselves. He told their mother that she was too tired, that he did not mind stepping in. He said he was just being helpful. He began to tuck the girls into bed at night and stayed in their room for a little too long with the door a little too closed. Sometimes, when Ethan walked past the hallway, he saw his stepfather coming out of the girls' bedroom late, moving softly, like he did not want anyone to hear. It made Ethan's stomach twist for a second, but then his brain pushed the thought away. Because what was he supposed to think? This was the man who paid rent, the man everyone called Dad, the man his mother trusted, the man the girls had been told to obey. Who would he even tell? One of the first clear signs came on a school morning. The youngest sister, only about 7 years old, refused to get dressed. She clung to the door frame and said she did not want to go. She said her stomach hurt. She said she did not sleep well. Ethan's mother scolded her gently, telling her that she had to go to school, that she could not keep crying over nothing. The little girl looked at the floor and went quiet. This happened more and more, not just with her, but also with the other two sisters. They became jumpy. They were always sick. They did not want to invite friends over anymore. They did not want to go to sleepovers either. They wanted to stay where they could see Ethan, where they could hide in each other's beds. Have you ever seen a child lose their sparkle? It does not happen in one day. It is like watching a light flicker slowly, until one day you realize the room is darker, and you cannot remember when it first began. The girls stopped laughing as loudly as before. Their games became quieter. Their drawings changed. Bright rainbows and flowers turned into small figures in the corner of the page. Houses with no windows. Storm clouds. A sun half hidden. Teachers at school noticed they were more tired, more distracted. One of the girls started biting her nails until they bled. Another suddenly struggled with reading, even though she had been doing well before. On some mornings, Ethan saw his sister's eyes, red, puffy, like they had cried in the night, and then wiped their faces hard before leaving their room. In the evenings, the stepfather often called one of the girls to help him with something in the bedroom or the back room, fixing something, folding laundry, looking at a new tool, always one at a time. Never all three together. At first, they went when he called. After a while, Ethan noticed they began to move slower when they heard his voice. They looked at each other. They looked at Ethan. Sometimes, their eyes begged him to say something, to stop it, to give them a reason to not go. But he did not understand fully yet. His brain refused to put the pieces together. It felt too big, too ugly, too impossible. He told himself that he was imagining things. He told himself that adults would never let something like that happen. Still, the air in the house grew heavier. The stepfather also tightened his grip on Ethan. He went through his phone whenever he felt like it. He told him he was not allowed to have friends over unless he was home. When Ethan tried to spend time outside, his stepfather said that a real man stayed in the house and helped his mother. When Ethan made a mistake, even a small one, he was reminded that he was lucky to live there at all. He was told that without his stepfather, they would all be on the street, isolating them, controlling the money, controlling their time, controlling their bodies. Piece by piece, this man made himself the center of everything. Ethan's mother seemed to shrink around him. She stopped visiting her old friends. She never went out without telling him exactly where she was going. She checked her phone often, worried he would text and ask where she was. When the girls tried to tell her they did not want to be alone with him, she brushed it off. She told them they were being rude, that this man loved them like his own. Maybe she refused to see the signs. Maybe she saw them, but was too scared and too dependent to face them. Maybe a part of her knew something was wrong and pushed the thought deep down, where it would not ruin the fragile life she had worked so hard to build. What do you think is harder for a parent? To believe their child is lying, or to believe they have let a monster into their home? One night, everything almost came to light. Ethan was in his room, pretending to sleep. The walls in the house were thin, and sounds carried easily. He heard footsteps in the hallway. The floorboards creaked in a pattern he knew too well. The stepfather's slow, heavy walk. Then a soft knock. A bedroom door opening. He heard a small voice, shaky and unsure. He heard the door close. His heart started beating faster. A feeling he did not have words for twisted in his chest. He got up quietly, moved to his own door, and opened it just a crack. The hallway was dark. Only the blue light of the TV in the living room spilled into it. He saw the shadow of his stepfather near his sister's room. The door almost closed. Just a line of dim light. He stood there, frozen. He could go over. He could open the door. He could say something. He could shout. He could tell his mother. But he did nothing. He closed his own door and pressed his back against it. He stared at the ceiling. He tried not to hear anything else. He tried to pretend this was normal, that he was overreacting, that adults knew what they were doing. Later, he would hate himself for that night. Later, he would think about that moment again and again and wonder if he could have stopped everything sooner. The next day, his middle sister did not meet his eyes at breakfast. She barely spoke. When the stepfather touched her shoulder, she flinched, then forced a small, fake smile. It was like watching someone put on a mask that did not fit. Weeks turned into months. The pattern continued. The girls grew quieter. The stepfather grew bolder. Ethan's mother grew more tired and more defensive any time anyone hinted that something felt wrong in the house. And Ethan turned into a storm bottled up in a boy's body. He became more angry at school. He got into fights. Teachers started calling home. The stepfather used this as more proof that Ethan was the problem. He told the mother that her son was out of control, that he needed a firm hand, that he could end up in jail if someone did not fix him. The man who was secretly hurting 3 little girls was now acting like the moral leader of the family. Isn't that one of the darkest things about some monsters? They wear normal faces. They use normal words. They say they are protecting the family, while they are the ones destroying it. One evening, something changed. The youngest sister, shaking and pale, came into Ethan's room. She did not use many words. She did not say everything. Children almost never say everything at once. But she said enough. She said she did not want to be alone with their stepfather anymore. She said he did things that made her feel scared and sick. In simple, broken sentences, She let a piece of the truth slip out. Ethan felt like the floor dropped under him. All of the small signs, all of the quiet cries, all of the strange nights in the hallway came rushing together in his mind like a wave. He did not want to believe it, but a part of him knew. He had always known. He hugged his sister and told her, in his own clumsy way, that he would protect them. He promised himself that he would never let that man near them again. But how could a 15-year-old boy fight a grown man who controlled the money, the house, and even his mother's mind? What could he really do? Tell a teacher? Tell the police? Tell his mother, who might not believe him? As he lay awake that night, staring at the cracked ceiling, one heavy, wrong idea slid quietly into his mind and refused to leave. An idea that would sit there in the dark, waiting for the right moment. An idea that would someday lead him to open a drawer, find a gun, and walk into the living room. The danger was no longer just a feeling. It was real. It was here. It was touching the people he loved most. And with every day that passed, Ethan's belief in grown-ups, in rules, in the system began to die, leaving room for something else to grow in its place. Desperation, and a terrible kind of courage, the kind that can push a child to do something that will change everything forever. The secret was no longer a shadow. It had a shape now. It had small shaking hands and red eyes and the soft, broken voice of a child who finally could not hold it in anymore. After the youngest sister came into Ethan's room that night and told him pieces of what was happening, nothing in the house felt the same. The walls seemed closer. The air felt thicker. Every sound of footsteps in the hallway made Ethan's muscles tense. He watched everything. He noticed how his middle sister avoided looking at their stepfather, how the oldest sister froze when he called her name, how the youngest flinched if he walked too fast. It was like suddenly the lights were turned on in a room he had been standing in for years. The furniture had not moved. The doors were in the same place. But now he could see all the dirt, the cracks, the broken parts. He could not go back to the dark. Ethan began to test the waters. One afternoon, he tried to talk to his mother in the kitchen. The girls were watching a cartoon in the living room. The stepfather was out buying beer. The house was almost peaceful. Ethan's mother was washing dishes, her shoulders slumped, her hair pulled back in a rushed knot. Ethan spoke carefully. He mentioned that the girls did not like being alone with their stepfather. He said they seemed scared. He said he did not think it was right that he was always in their room with the door closed. His mother's hands stilled in the soapy water for a second. Then she shook her head and told him that he was being dramatic. She said that his stepfather was the only one really helping her. She said the girls were just going through phases, that kids sometimes act strange. She reminded Ethan of the money, the rent, the food, the way this man had saved them. Her voice trembled in a way that told another story, fear. Ethan did not know if she really did not see the truth, or if she saw too much of it and felt trapped. Maybe both. He wanted to scream. He wanted to grab her shoulders and force her to listen. But instead, he swallowed his words. He felt them burn all the way down. Have you ever tried to scream underwater? That is what it feels like when you see something terrible and no one believes you. At school, Ethan tried a different path. He went to the school counselor one day, pretending it was about his own anger and fights. The counselor's office was small, with soft chairs and posters on the wall about feelings and courage and telling the truth. The counselor asked gentle questions. Ethan tried to answer without saying too much, but his eyes gave him away. Finally, in a low and shaky voice, he said that he thought someone in his house was hurting his sisters. He did not use big words. He did not describe everything. He just said enough for any adult to feel a cold grip of worry around their heart. The counselor grew quiet. She leaned forward. She said she would have to report it. She explained, in simple terms, that when there is a sign a child might be in danger, grown-ups are required by law to tell special workers. These workers are part of a group often called Child Protective Services, or CPS, whose job is to check if kids are safe at home. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a thin thread of hope. Maybe someone will finally see. Maybe someone will finally listen. Maybe someone will finally protect them. Within days, a woman from CPS came to the house. She wore plain clothes and carried a folder. She spoke softly. She asked questions. She sat at the kitchen table with Ethan's mother. She asked the girls to talk to her one by one. But here's the hard truth. Children who are scared and controlled do not always open up in front of strangers. The girls had been trained by fear. They had been told no one would believe them. They had been told the family would be torn apart. They had been told it would all somehow be their fault. So when the CPS worker asked if everything was okay at home, they stared at their hands. They said as little as possible. They shrugged. They said they were fine. Ethan watched this from the doorway, his heart sinking. His stepfather sat at the table too, at first acting offended that anyone would question him. Then he acted hurt. Then he acted charming. He told the worker that troubled teenage boys make up stories when they do not like rules. He said Ethan had behavior problems. He said he was just trying to be a strong father figure. The CPS worker took notes. She looked at everyone. She left with promises. Weeks passed. Nothing changed. No one was removed from the house. No court orders came. No police arrived. Maybe a file was made and put in a drawer. Maybe it was marked unfounded, which in simple words means not enough proof. Maybe the system was busy with many other families, many other emergencies. Whatever the reason, for Ethan and his sisters, the message felt clear. No one is coming. The stepfather was careful for a little while after that visit. He kept doors open more often. He acted sweeter. He gave the girls gifts. He talked to them in a soft, syrupy voice that made Ethan's skin crawl. But predators who think they are untouchable often slide back into their old ways. Slowly, the late-night visits to the girls' room began again. The lingering hands, the locked doors, the quiet crying in the dark. The abuse continued. Only now it was worse, because now everyone in that house knew that even when they tried to ask for help, the help might not actually come. Can you imagine the kind of loneliness that creates in a child's heart? Ethan changed. He began to feel like he was walking around with a volcano inside his chest. On the outside, he was just a teenage boy with messy hair, old sneakers, and a bad attitude. On the inside, there was lava burning everything. He could not sleep. He could not think about normal things like homework or games. His mind always went back to the hallway, to the closed door, to the sound of his sister's muffled sobs. He tried small acts of protection. He started staying up later, sitting in the hallway with his phone in his hand, pretending to scroll but really listening. If his stepfather walked toward the girl's room, Ethan would appear in the hall and ask a question, any question. Sometimes it worked and the man turned away. Sometimes it did not. He also taught his sisters quiet ways to signal him. A certain knock on the wall. A certain way to leave their bedroom door. A small object placed in the hallway. They were children designing safety plans in a house where the adult in charge was the danger. One night, the stepfather snapped at Ethan. He accused him of trying to turn the girls against him. He said he was being disrespectful. His eyes were cold, and his voice was low. The kind of voice that makes the hair on your arms stand up. He told Ethan that if he kept causing trouble, he would regret it. Later that week, Ethan came home from school early because a teacher had sent him away after another angry outburst. When he walked through the front door, the house was too quiet. The TV was off. The kitchen was empty. His mother's car was not in the driveway. He heard a sound from down the hall. A small, choked sound. He moved quietly, his heart racing. With each step, a sick feeling grew in his stomach. He knew this feeling now. It had become like a cruel friend that never left his side. He reached the girl's bedroom. The door was not fully closed, just pulled almost shut. Through the thin gap, he saw enough to erase any last piece of doubt he had ever had. He saw his stepfather where no grown man should ever be with a child. He saw his sister's face twisted with panic and shame and confusion. There are some moments that cut your life in half, before and after. This was that moment for Ethan. He did not shout. He did not scream. He did not rush in and attack. His whole body turned cold, and something inside him went very, very quiet. He stepped back unseen and walked to his own room. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely turn the knob. He sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the wall. In that silence, something dark and hard formed in him. Trust in adults, gone. Trust in systems, gone. Patience, gone. Only one thought remained, heavy and dangerous. No one is going to stop him unless I do. That thought scared him. He tried to push it away. He thought about running away with his sisters. But where would they go? They had no money, no car. They were just kids. He thought about going back to the counselor, to CPS, to the police. But in his mind, he saw papers and phones and adults talking slowly while more nights passed. He did not want more nights. He wanted it to end. Days passed in a blur. The house felt like a cage filling with smoke. The girls clung to Ethan more. The stepfather watched him with narrowed eyes. He seemed to sense that the boy knew everything now. One afternoon, Ethan was in his mother's room, looking for laundry to help with. A drawer was partly open. Something metal glinted inside. He pulled it open more. There it was. The gun. It lay there among old shirts and socks, as if it were just another tool, like a hammer or a flashlight. It looked smaller than he imagined a gun would look. Somehow that made it more frightening, not less. He picked it up. The weight of it surprised him. Heavy, solid, real. He had seen guns in movies, in games, on TV. But holding one in his hand was different. It was like holding a final decision. His heart pounded. He could put it back. He could close the drawer and walk away. He could pretend he never saw it. Or he could keep it and change everything. What would you do in that moment if you were 15, scared and furious, watching 3 little girls suffer while every adult system failed them? There's no easy answer. No clean one. Ethan slid the gun under his mattress. For days, he did nothing. He went to school. He came home. He watched the hallway. He tried to think. He tried to hope that somehow, something would happen to fix this without him having to use that gun. But nothing changed, until the night it finally broke. His mother was working a late shift. The house was dim, lit only by the TV. The stepfather had been drinking. He shouted at the game on the screen, his voice loud and ugly. The girls were in their room, the door partly open. Then Ethan heard it, his stepfather's voice calling one of the girls to come to the living room. The tone was too sweet. The words stuck like thorns in Ethan's mind. The girl hesitated. Ethan saw fear flash across her face as she stepped into the hallway. Something inside him snapped. He went to his room without thinking. His hands moved on their own. He reached under the mattress and closed his fingers around the gun. The metal felt cold, but his skin felt hot, like his blood had turned to fire. He walked back down the short hallway. Each step felt like walking through thick mud, like the house was trying to hold him back. The living room opened in front of him. The TV glow, the beer bottles, the worn-out couch. His stepfather turning, annoyed at being interrupted. Ethan raised the gun. In this moment, everything in his life seemed to come crashing together. Every ignored sign, every closed door, every quiet cry, every failed visit, from help that never truly helped. The volcano inside him was no longer trapped. It had reached the surface. The gun was pointed at the man's chest. And in the split second before anything else happened, before the noise, before the fall, before the sirens and the neighbors and the police, there was only a boy, a man, and a choice. A choice that would decide not just one life, but every life in that house. The moment the trigger moved, time seemed to bend. The sound of the gunshot tore through the small house. The walls shook. The TV noise disappeared under it for a second. It was like the whole world blinked. The stepfather's body jerked on the couch. His hand flew to his chest. His eyes went wide with a look that was part anger, part shock, and part something else Ethan could not name. The man who always controlled everything suddenly looked small and confused. Then he fell sideways, half on the couch, half off, knocking over bottles and the TV remote. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. No one moved. No one spoke. The air felt thick and frozen. Then the house woke up. In the girl's bedroom, the youngest sister screamed. It was a raw, high sound that had been trapped in her for years. The other two grabbed her and held on. Their bodies shook. They did not know if they were now safer, or in even more danger. You have to remember, they were just kids. They did not see a case, or a self-defense, or a homicide. Those are adult words. They just saw their brother holding a gun and the man who hurt them lying on the couch. Ethan's ears rang. His arm dropped, heavy as stone. He stared at his stepfather's chest, rising in short, sharp breaths. There was no movie-style speech, no cool final line. There was only panic crashing into him all at once. He had done it. He had really done it. He had fired a gun at another human being. The stepfather gasped, clutching his chest. He tried to push himself up, then dropped back. His face lost color. The power he had always carried in his shoulders, in his voice, in his eyes, leaked away like air from a balloon. Ethan did not feel like a hero. He felt like a boy who had stepped off a cliff and was still falling. The girl's bedroom door burst open. The middle sister peered out first, eyes wide, her hand shaking on the doorknob. Behind her, the youngest was crying hard, almost choking on her own sobs. The oldest sister stood frozen, trying to act strong but clearly terrified. They saw the scene in the living room, their stepfather on the couch, their brother standing with the gun, the TV still playing a game no one was watching. For a second, nobody moved. There was a new fear now. Would Ethan turn the gun on himself? Would the stepfather get up and attack? Would the police go and come and take all of them away? Ethan's hand started to tremble so badly he thought he might drop the gun. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. His brain screamed at him to do something, anything, before this got even worse. He turned, moving slowly like he was underwater, and placed the gun on the coffee table. He stepped back, hands in the air, breathing fast. He told his sisters, in a broken voice, not to touch it. He told them to stay back. He told them it was going to be okay, even though he did not believe it. In that moment, he made another choice. He would not run. He would not lie. He would face what he had just done. Next came the calls for help. A neighbor across the street had already heard the gunshot. The sound cut through the evening like lightning. This neighbor stood at the window for a second, then grabbed their phone and called emergency services. They reported a loud bang, maybe a gun, at the house with a family. 3 little girls lived. Inside the house, Ethan grabbed the old phone from the end table with shaking hands. His fingers almost slipped off the numbers. He called emergency services too. His voice shook as he told them that someone had been shot. He said it was in his house. He said the man was bleeding and struggling to breathe. In simple, broken words, he admitted that he was the one who pulled the trigger. The operator on the other end spoke in a calm, practiced voice. They told him to stay on the line. They told him to keep his sisters away from the gun. They told him to watch the stepfather's breathing and to get ready for police officers and paramedics to arrive. The sirens started as a faint wail in the distance. Then they grew louder. Blue and red lights flashed against the front windows. Tires crunched on the gravel. Doors slammed. Officers shouted orders as they ran toward the house. From the outside, it looked like every other crime scene you see on TV. Flashing lights, curious neighbors, a small house suddenly full of uniforms and noise. From the inside, it felt like the end of the world. The first officers pushed through the front door, weapons drawn, shouting for anyone inside to show their hands. Ethan did not try to argue. He raised his hands high and told them, with a shaking voice, that the gun was on the table and that he was the one who had called. They moved fast. One officer rushed to the stepfather, checking his chest, his breathing, his pulse. Another officer grabbed the gun from the table carefully, pointing it away from everyone, and secured it. 2 more officers guided the girls out of the living room. They wrapped them in blankets, even though it was not really cold. They sat them on the front steps, out of the way, where they could breathe. The youngest sister clung to the oldest, shaking so hard her teeth clicked together. The middle sister stared straight ahead, her eyes blank, like she had left her body for a while. They were no longer hidden. They were now witnesses. Paramedics rushed in with bags and a stretcher. They worked quickly on the stepfather, pressing, checking, speaking in short, serious phrases. They loaded him onto the stretcher and carried him out of the house. His face was pale. His eyes were half open but unfocused. As the ambulance doors closed, the neighbors stared. Some whispered that they always knew that house was trouble. Others said they could not believe it. They talked about how the stepfather always waved, how he helped fix a fence once, how he seemed like a good man. It is strange how little most people really know about what happens behind closed doors. Back inside, officers turned their attention to Ethan. He was 15. He looked younger in that moment, standing in the middle of the living room, hands still slightly raised, his whole body shaking. But to the law, he was the person who had fired a gun into another person's chest. One officer gently pulled his hands down and told him to turn around. They put cold metal handcuffs around his wrists. They read him his rights in simple words, telling him he did not have to talk, that he could ask for a lawyer. He barely heard them. He watched his sisters through the open door, sitting on the steps, wrapped in blankets, eyes wide. He wondered if they hated him, or if they were finally safe. Outside the house, another car pulled up. It was Ethan's mother. She had gotten a call at work that there had been an incident at her house. She did not understand at first. Maybe she thought it was a break-in, a small accident, something simple. But as she turned the corner and saw the street filled with police cars and an ambulance, her heart dropped. An officer met her before she could reach the door. They spoke to her in low tones. They told her there had been a shooting. They told her that her husband was on the way to the hospital in critical condition. They told her that her son was the one who pulled the trigger. Her legs almost gave out. She looked at Ethan in the back of the police car, hands cuffed, face pale. She looked at her girls on the steps, wrapped in blankets, the youngest crying. The pieces did not fit in her mind at first. She did not want to believe any of it. Soon detectives arrived. They were not in uniform. They wore plain clothes and carried notebooks. They stepped around the living room, looking at everything. The bullet hole, the blood on the couch, the empty beer bottles, the position of the gun. Crime scene investigators came with cameras and small bags for evidence. They took pictures from every angle. They collected the bullet casing. They marked spots on the floor with small yellow numbers. On paper, they were building a story from objects, but the real story lived in the bodies and memories of the people who lived there. Later, at the station, one of the detectives sat with each sister, one by one, with a trained child interviewer. There were toys in the room and soft chairs, but the air was still heavy. They asked careful questions. They did not push too hard. They let the girls choose their words. Little by little, the truth came out. Not in one long speech, not in perfect lines, in small pieces, in whispered words about nights when their door was closed, about hands where they never should have been, about threats that no one would believe them, about a brother who sat in the hallway like a guard when he could. Medical exams at the hospital would later support their words. Old injuries, signs of long-term abuse, things children do not invent. The stepfather's life ended at the hospital not long after the ambulance arrived. The bullet in his chest had done too much damage. Doctors tried, but there was nothing more they could do. On a form, someone wrote the time of death. On another form, next to cause, they wrote a few cold words. But those cold words did not say everything. They did not say years of secret abuse. They did not say system that did not act fast enough. They did not say 15-year-old boy pushed past the breaking point. Back at the police station, Ethan sat in a small room. His hands were no longer cuffed, but they still felt like they were. He stared at the table. A tape recorder sat between him and the detective. A lawyer would later sit with him. For now, the detective spoke slowly, carefully, explaining that they needed to understand what happened. Ethan told them about the night in the hallway. He told them about the youngest sister coming to his room. He told them about CPS visiting and leaving. He told them about the drawer with the gun. He told them about the call to the living room that final night, and how his sister's face looked when she heard her name. He did not try to make himself sound brave. He did not try to sound clever. He sounded like what he was, a kid who loved his sisters more than his own future, and who believed that no one else was coming to save them. Still, the law is not a simple thing. Killing someone, Even a monster is still killing someone. By the end of that long night, Ethan was officially placed under arrest. Because of his age, he was taken not to an adult jail, but to a juvenile detention center. A place with locked doors, metal bunks, and too much time to think. His sisters were taken into emergency care, at least for a while. Social workers arranged for them to stay with relatives or in foster homes, while the state decided what to do next. They were safe from their stepfather now, but far from okay. The case began to grow. Police reports, medical reports, school reports, old CPS notes, phone records. All of it stacked up into a thick file with Ethan's name on one side and his stepfather's name on the other. Some people in town called Ethan a cold-blooded killer. Others called him a hero. The truth, like in many stories, was not that simple. The big questions now moved from the small house on the quiet street to the courtroom. Would the law see Ethan as a murderer? Would it see him as a child who did what he thought he had to do? Would the story of the years of abuse change anything about what happened in that living room? The juvenile cell was small. A narrow bed, a metal toilet, a thin blanket, white walls that seemed to lean in, a thick door with a small window. Ethan lay on his back and stared at the ceiling. He could hear other boys calling out, laughing, swearing, pretending they were not scared. But he was not thinking about them. He was thinking about the living room, the gun, his sisters' faces, the moment when the stepfather's body fell sideways on the couch. He replayed it again and again. Sometimes, in his mind, he did not pull the trigger. In those versions, his sisters grew up and moved away, still carrying their secret. In other versions, the stepfather hurt them worse. In some, Ethan tried again to tell adults, and nothing changed. There were no versions where everything turned out clean and easy. He was stuck with the one he chose. Outside his cell, the case moved forward like a slow, heavy train. First came the charges. Prosecutors decided to charge Ethan with a serious crime, homicide. In simple words, that means causing the death of another person. But they also had to decide how the law should see the way it happened. Was it murder, done with cold planning? Was it manslaughter, done in a moment of intense emotion? Was it something else? His lawyers argued from the very beginning that this was not a simple killing. They said it was the act of a child in crisis. A boy who had begged for help and watched help fail. A boy who believed his sisters would never be safe as long as that man lived in their home. Because Ethan was 15, there was a question. Should he be treated like a child in the legal system or like an adult? Some people wanted him tried as an adult, which would mean harsher punishment and a real prison if he was found guilty. Others said he should stay in the juvenile system, which focuses more on help and change. This alone became a battle. During this time, more and more information came out. Doctors who examined the three little sisters wrote detailed reports. They found injuries and signs that matched long-term sexual abuse. Forensic experts said these were not new wounds and not accidents. School records showed behavior changes, sudden drops in grades, signs of trauma. The CPS file showed that a report had been made before, that someone had come to the house, that nothing strong had been done. Slowly, the story on paper began to look a lot like the story the children had been trying to tell with their eyes and their quiet fear. The girls spoke more, too. With the stepfather gone and some time away from the house, they began to open up in sessions with child therapists. They described in simple, painful words what he had done to them, when it started, how long it lasted, and how he had threatened them. They said he told them no one would believe them. They said they tried to tell in small ways, but people did not understand. They said their brother was the only one who ever really watched, who ever tried to step in, who ever sat in the hall like a guard. All of this would later be used in court. News of the case spread through town and then beyond. People argued on social media and in comments. Some called Ethan a monster who should have never used a gun. Others said they would have done the same thing if they saw someone hurting their little sisters. But the court is not run by comments or feelings. It is run by rules, laws, evidence, and people who must look at all of it. After months of waiting, the day of the hearing and later the trial finally came. Ethan was brought into the courtroom wearing simple clothes instead of a jumpsuit. He looked smaller than before. His hair was a bit longer. His eyes had dark circles under them, like he had not slept well in a long time. The courtroom itself felt like a different world. Wooden benches, a high desk for the judge, a box for the jury, flags on the wall. Everything was quiet, serious, heavy. His mother sat on one side, tears in her eyes. She had been forced to face the truth about what had happened in her home. She carried a deep, crushing guilt for not seeing, not acting, not believing sooner. She loved both her son and her daughters, and in this room, love felt twisted and painful. The three sisters sat behind a victim's advocate, a person whose job is to support and explain things to them. They held each other's hands. They were still so young, but their eyes looked older now. The judge explained, in simple words, what was happening. The prosecution told their version first. They did not deny the abuse. They admitted the stepfather had done terrible things. But they said there were other ways to stop him. Call the police again. Leave the house. Tell a teacher. Tell a neighbor. They said picking up a gun and shooting someone in the chest in the living room was still a serious crime that could not be ignored. The defense then told their side. They painted a picture of years of fear, of a boy watching his sisters fall apart, of trying to tell adults and watching nothing change, of a system that brushed past the warning signs. They described the moment in the hallway, the final night, the look on his sister's face when she was called into the living room. They asked the jury to see not just the act, but the weight that sat on the boy's shoulders. Experts were called. Child psychologists explained how abuse twists a child's mind, how it steals their sense of safety, how it changes how they see choices. They said that sometimes, young people in extreme situations see violence as the only door left open, especially when every other door has been shut. CPS workers were asked hard questions. Why was nothing done sooner? Why were the girls left in that house? Why was the stepfather never removed? No one could answer in a way that made the pain lighter. The system has rules, limits, mistakes. But those answers do not comfort children who were left unprotected. Then, one by one, the sisters gave their testimony. The judge allowed some of it to be done by video or with special screens to make it less scary. Their voices were small but clear. They told the court what their stepfather had done. They said their brother had tried to help. They said they did not hate him. Some said they believed he saved them. Imagine sitting in that courtroom, hearing a child say they feel safer because someone who hurt them is dead. It is not simple. It is not clean, but it is real. Finally, Ethan himself spoke. He did not try to look brave. He did not look at anyone in the eye for long. He said, in a soft voice, that he wished he had found another way. He said he wished someone else had stopped the man before. He said he never wanted to be a killer. He said he only wanted his sisters to be safe. He did not ask the court to forget what he had done. He just asked them to see why he did it. When all the talking was done, the jury had to decide. They were normal people, workers, parents, older students, neighbors. They listened to the law, to the judge's instructions. They looked at the photos, the reports, the timelines. They thought about the shot in the living room. They thought about the years in the hallway. They went into a room and closed the door. Hours passed. For Ethan, it felt like days. When the jury came back, the courtroom was completely silent. In many versions of stories like this, the ending can go different ways. Sometimes, boys like Ethan get the harshest punishment, as if the law cannot bend to see their pain. Sometimes, they walk away with no punishment at all, which sends another painful message. In this story, the court chose a middle path. They did not say what he did was right, but they also did not treat him like a cold, adult murderer. The judge explained the decision in calm, firm words. The court found that Ethan had caused the death of his stepfather, but they accepted that years of abuse and the failure of adults around him made this a very special, tragic kind of case. Instead of sending him to adult prison for decades, the judge ordered that Ethan stay in the juvenile system for several years. He would be locked up until he was older, but he would also get therapy, schooling, and help to understand his trauma and his choices. The court said it wanted to protect the public, but also give him a chance to build a different life when he was finally released. Some people were angry at this. They wanted more punishment. Others thought even this was too much for a child who had done what the grown-ups should have done long ago. But the truth is, in cases like this, there is no sentence that can fix everything. The stepfather is dead. The sisters will carry scars in their minds and hearts for years. The mother will live with her guilt. Ethan will never forget the sound of the gunshot. After the case ended, the sisters went to live with relatives who were carefully checked. Slowly, with therapy and time, they began to smile a little more. They learned that what happened to them was not their fault. They learned words like survivor instead of victim. They still missed the brother who had held their hands when no one else did. Ethan spent his teenage years in a locked place, but he did not waste them. He went to classes. He wrote in a journal. He talked to counselors. He learned to speak about what happened without shaking as much. He did not see himself as a hero. He saw himself as a boy who made a choice in a world that gave him terrible options. One day, when he was older, he would walk out of that place with a second chance. The question would follow him everywhere. Did he save his sisters, or did he ruin all of their lives? The answer, like many things in true crime, is not simple. On one hand, his act stopped a monster. His sisters were never hurt by that man again. On the other hand, the cost was huge. A killing, a broken family, years of loss. Could this have been stopped earlier? Maybe. If teachers had pushed harder. If CPS had acted more strongly. If neighbors had looked closer. If his mother had trusted her instincts and her children more than her fear of losing a man who paid the bills. Was it mental illness? Bad parenting? A sick, cruel man? A slow system? It was all of those things together. This story is not an excuse for what Ethan did. It is not a guide saying violence is the answer. It is a warning about what happens when children cry for help in silent ways, and the adults around them do not listen hard enough. If there's one thing to remember, maybe it is this. Sometimes the monsters in true crime are not strangers in dark alleys. Sometimes they are the people sitting on the couch, holding the remote, calling themselves dad, while the world looks the other way. And sometimes the person holding the weapon at the end is not a villain from a movie, but a scared child who felt like he had no other door to walk through. If you learned something from this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.